Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday afternoon. Hope yours is going well. We've got another Seahawks video to get today, but first, we just hit 2,230 subscribers to the channel. I want to give a shout out to all the subscribers, and special tip of the cap goes to the channel members, especially elite channel members HaWKxXA, Brandon Mikel, Rip, Scott Todd, Hasher for MVP, VGK Tiger 75, John Harper, and Salacious Crumb. All right. It is time for the final episode of 2020's Road to 150. It is time for a final evaluation of the Seahawks pass rush in 2020. How did it improve from last year? How does it stack up compared to what you would expect from a good NFL pass rush? And yeah, basically we're going to figure out if the pass rush was able to make enough improvements from 2019 to justify keeping some of these players and some of these coaches around. Now, before we get into the Road to 150, I want to stress that the point of these weekly series is we are evaluating elements of this team that are in question and need to be improved on. I've had a lot of people lately ask me, you should do a Jamal Adams watch next year. You should do a DK Metcalf watch next year. And maybe that would be fun, but that's not really the point of these weekly series that I did this year. The point is to keep an eye on something that was a problem last year and that there was reason to believe could be a problem this year. So to the people out there who want me to do a Jamal Adams watch next year or a DK Metcalf watch next year, I would ask you, does anybody in the world doubt whether or not DK Metcalf and Jamal Adams are part of the Seahawks' long-term plans, that they're playing at a very high level and helping this team win more than they help them lose? I don't think so. I don't think anybody doubts those guys are earning their money, and in the case of DK Metcalf, he's earning far less than he probably should given his level of play. So the reason why I chose the three categories that I did this year, Let Russ Cook, Wagner Watch, Road to 150, were because those were three things that needed to improve in 2020. So I want to stress that the purpose of this series was to monitor the pass rush to make sure it had improved from a pretty dismal 2019. Now, with that in mind, let's go ahead and look at the chart. Let's see how these players ended up doing, and let's see what we can say about how their performance fits into the mosaic of the 2020 Seahawks defense. So, starting at the defensive line, let's start with Rasheem Green. He came in well under expectations in 2020. He had 13 QB pressures. I wanted 30. Now, I will say this. Rasheem Green has acquitted himself fairly well in recent weeks. He's been playing a lot better. He's had a much bigger impact on games. He is rounding into form, and he has the opportunity to be an important part of a playoff push. And a big reason why he didn't reach the expectations in 2020 were, well, he got injured and missed a month and a half. Do I think he would have gotten to 30 QB pressures in 2020 if he didn't get hurt? Probably not. But part of the reason why that is because he lost some snaps to somebody like a Carlos Dunlap. So I'm not super down on Rasheem Green, despite him falling well short of my expectations. But if you're looking for a reason as to why the Seahawks pass rush wasn't better than it was in 2020, Rasheem Green not having a breakout third year is one of the lead reasons why. Next up, we have Benson Mayowa, and he did fall a little bit short of his 2020 projection. I said 24. He ended up with 21, but he missed several games, and I think he actually played pretty well this season. I know we're all still mad at him for the penalty against Arizona that may have cost us that game. I get that. But Benson Mayowa has turned in a very solid season as a pass rusher. If he did not get hurt, he would have almost certainly reached 24 QB pressures in 2020, and the fact that he got close even though he did get hurt tells me that we got more than our money's worth out of him. Now, is he great? No. There's a reason why Pro Football Focus is very, very down on him. He's a limited player. He doesn't do as much as you would want from a player who plays as many snaps as he does, but he found his way to contribute, and I appreciate what Benson Mayowa did for the 2020 Seahawks. Didn't quite get to my projection, but he played pretty well. LJ Collier next up. He comes in more than double what I wanted from him in 2020. And I had very low expectations for him in 2020, in all fairness. I said, let's get to 7 QB pressures and go from there. He ended up with 17. So, granted, I thought LJ Collier was a big bust coming into this season. I was not a fan of his. Me heaping praise onto him now rings a little hollow because, let's face it, you guys understand that when you have very low expectations for a player and they meet it, that doesn't mean you should heap a bunch of praise on them. This is still a first round pick who is barely contributing to the team, but he contributed more than I gave him credit for. He ended up averaging more than one pressure a game, and he made some significant plays over the course of the 2020 season that helped this team win. So I'm going to say that this was a good step for LJ Collier, and next year we'll find out a whole lot more about him, but I would call this second year for his standards successful. All right, Alton Robinson, the rookie, another guy who blew past expectations, very nearly tripled them. 11 QB pressures in 2020, this despite not playing in every game. I only expected 4 from him, but he really worked his way into this rotation and has made it very clear that he is going to be a part of this defense going forward, and I have to believe he's going to be part of the rotation in the playoffs, which is a big positive coming from a guy who was a rookie in a bum off season. So very happy with what Alton Robinson was able to do. Very successful rookie season for him in my estimation. Demontre Moore is next. He has basically not been playing defensive end lately. He hasn't picked up a pressure in a few games now, but he did manage to reach his 2020 projection despite being suspended for 6 games. So I want to say this. Demontre Moore will not really be remembered as one of the key contributors to the 2020 Seahawks, but I think he had his value, and I think he did some positive stuff for this team. And for the low price of less than $1 million, I feel like we got something pretty good out of Demontre Moore. So shout out to him. Because when we signed him, I didn't know what to expect. I kind of went a little bold when I said he was going to get 8 pressures. And he got there. And he got there despite relatively limited snaps. So, yeah. Now we move on to our defensive tackles. Let's start with a Jarran Reed. Look, he didn't get there. And he played all 16 games. He missed very few snaps over the course of the season. He has no excuse to have not gotten to his 2020 projection. However, the man was able to improve as the season went on. And it's gotten to the point now where I'm viewing his injury and potential, he has the potential to miss the game on Saturday as something that could be a crushing blow to this defense instead of a minor footnote. So there's something to be said for that. He has played a lot better as the season has gone on. He had his best game of the year and the most important game of the year against the Rams. And he ended up not far off from my 2020 target. You could make a pretty good argument that if he got to play the whole season with Carlos Dunlap, he probably would have gotten there. And either way, he's been doing good stuff lately. So I can only hope that he's able to contribute in the playoffs. And I'm no longer completely hating that contract we gave him. And a month and a half, 2 months ago, I would have said, hey, that contract was a disaster. So step in the right direction. Speaking of steps in the right direction, Poona Ford is next. I only expected 6 QB pressures from him in 2020. I was not really going out of my way to expect a bunch from Poona because I thought he had established himself pretty firmly as a dedicated run-stuffing tackle, but he really improved in this area and may have played himself into a much bigger contract. He got 14 QB pressures in 2020, more than double what I expected, almost won a game. And again, I want to stress, Poona Ford's profile is that of a run-stuffing defensive tackle. So Poona Ford was a big reason why the pass rush was able to pick it up in the second half of the season, and a big part of the reason why the pass rush was able to improve as much as it did in 2020. All right, Brian Monet ended up with 2 pressures. I expected 3. Not a big issue here, especially when you consider that Monet missed so many games. He almost certainly would have gotten to 3, and probably a few more than that had he played in all 16 games. Darrell Taylor never saw the field, so of course he has no QB pressures. Shaquem Griffin, I may have overstepped a little bit on this guy. When he got a roster spot after the Cowboys game, I thought he was going to do some pretty good stuff this year, and it just didn't manifest. He ended up with 3 QB pressures. I expected about 8. And at this point, he's a complete afterthought when it comes to this defense. He may as well not even be on the roster. Anthony Rush off the team. Bullard, at this point, he doesn't play. Carlos Dunlap, he managed to get to his 2020 projection with 15 QB pressures. He picked up quite a few against the 49ers in Week 17 to get there. And yeah, I would definitely say that Carlos Dunlap has been one of the more successful midseason pickups in Seahawks, Pete Carroll, John Schneider history. So yeah, Dunlap was a big part of the reason why we were able to meet our goals in 2020 in terms of a pass rush. And I do want to give Dunlap a whole heck of a lot of credit for that, because I think he also made Jerron Reed a much better player. Finally, Damon Harrison never ended up pressuring the QB at all. And at the end of the year, our 2020 projection from the defensive line was met. Now, there are some key caveats when we discuss that, and I'll get into that a little later. But we did technically meet our 2020 projection for pressures from defensive linemen. All right, now we're going to move on to the linebackers. This should be quick. There were no new pressures on Sunday against the 49ers from the linebacker position. We ended up with 24 total pressures from the position, and we almost got to our 2020 goal despite the fact that Bruce Irvin got injured in Game 2, and he was supposed to provide the bulk of the pressures from this spot. Wagner exceeded expectations by a lot. KJ exceeded expectations by a lot. We got some nice contributions from the youngins, and yeah, we actually got a healthy amount of pressure from our linebackers in 2020. All right, cornerbacks, nothing new from the 49ers game. We ended up with 2 pressures combined from cornerbacks in 2020, one from Shaq, one from DJ Reed. Pretty much what I expected. I expected the one pressure to come from Trey Flowers. I expected Ugo Amadi to have a couple more pressures than he did when he took over the nickel corner position, but that never manifested. I don't think he blitzed more than a few times all season anyway, so this seems reasonable to me. And finally, the safety position, of course, the man, the myth, the legend, team-leading Jamal Adams with 25 QB pressures from the safety position. I only expected 9. This alone destroys my projection for the entire safety position. Quandre Diggs, Marquise Blair, Delano Hill ended up not doing anything. Ryan Neal had that one game against the Vikings where he had 3 QB pressures. So it ended up being a pretty successful year from the pass rush in terms of the safety blitzing, which is good for me because I was really concerned when we got Jamal Adams that we weren't going to understand how to properly use him. And at the end of the year, our total number of QB pressures got to 181, which is well above the 150 that I wanted in 2020. Now, here's the thing. As you guys know, we faced a lot of pass attempts in 2020. A lot. In fact, you guys may remember I talked about us breaking the all-time record for pass attempts faced by a defense in NFL history. We did that. We ended up facing 674 pass attempts. The record was 670, so we now own that record. So that has to be taken into account when you're trying to evaluate our pass rush. So it's not as good as this number would tell you, because actually our number of QB pressures this year was about the same as the Pittsburgh Steelers was last year when they led the league in sacks. But that doesn't mean our pass rush was better than their defense. It just means our pass rush faced more pass attempts than they did. So let's look at it another way. Let's go ahead and try to average things out a little bit based on how many pass attempts we faced. In 2019, we got 128 QB pressures on less than 600 pass attempts. It ended up coming out to, for every 4.7 almost, for every 4.7 pass attempts we faced, we got 1 QB pressure. In 2020, that number came down to 3.7. In 2020, for every 3.7 QB pressures, 3.7 pass attempts we faced, we got 1 QB pressure. So that's a pretty big improvement. That's 1 fewer pass attempt per pressure almost. And I'm not saying that we completely got to where I wanted to overall this season, but this is far more in line with what you want to see from your pass rush. And a big reason why we got to this point is because, quite simply, we were able to generate a lot of pressure against the Rams in Week 16, which also doubled as the most important game of the season. We were able to get a ton of pressure in a game against Arizona to save the season when we needed to avoid a 3-game losing streak. And a lot of the reason why this number isn't better is because the pass rush was bad in earlier games this season. So there was a lot of improvement as the season went on as well. Not only was the overall product better, but the pass rush seems to be playing their best football at the most important time. So, hey, I'm going to call this a pretty successful season for the pass rush. It took a while to get going. We needed the Dunlap trade to really get going. But hey, we also were able to do it without any contributions from Darrell Taylor. We were able to do it without Bruce Irvin. We were able to do it without even, I would say, Marquise Blair. So I would consider this season overall to be a success from the pass rush. I'm excited to see what these guys can do next year with a full offseason for guys like Collier and Alton Robinson and a full year from Carlos Dunlap. And yeah, that's really all I got for this one, guys. Great stuff going on here. Less than 4 pass attempts per QB pressure. Big step in the right direction for this defense. And with that, I'm going to say keep an eye out for streams later today. Peace out. Go Hawks. Hope you guys enjoyed these weekly series, and I'll be trying to bring it back next year with some new ones. See you guys later.